I'm excited to have the Allen brothers with me here this morning um, to talk about a book that was near and dear to my heart, to my daughter's heart, um, and just tell their story. So it's rare that you meet somebody at a training. Me and Dr. Allen met each other at a training on anti-bullying, and I overheard him talking about how he had written a book, Brotherly Love, a co-authored book by you and your brother. And Dr. Allen, I talked to you. You were like, "Yeah, I got one out in the car." And fast forward, and we're all here with you and your brother, Gilbert. It is a pleasure to have you guys here. Thank you so much for giving me the time. I know you guys are busy, and I really appreciate you taking this moment to just talk about something that's near and dear to your heart. Go ahead and introduce yourself so people know who's who, and give me a little bit on where you're at, where you're located, and then we'll get into some more formal questions as we move through it. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll jump in, I guess. I'm Dr. Michael Allen, career educator. I would consider, so this is my 13th year, wrapping up my 13th year as principal, 15 years in education total. Consider myself to be a lifelong ambassador for social equity and justice, and giving a voice to the vulnerable and marginalized in whatever way possible. Thank you for having us on.
No problem.
My name is Gilbert Allen. I'm a social worker. I've been working in the field for about 12 years. Yeah, I really care about trying to get back to marginalized group of people. Anybody that's struggling with mental health or coming from poverty or anything um, that has anything to do with barriers that we're trying to overcome. Um, that's literally my life purpose. And I'm super excited to be here with you today, Cliff. And thank you for having us. So,
No problem. No problem. So one of the things you had a term, Dr. Allen, when we spoke, you said operationalize hope. Operationalize hope. And what were some of the systematic steps that each of you took, right, to that for people that don't know what that is, how can somebody else put that into their lives? Unpack that a little bit for me.
I'll let Gilbert first, so I don't go first, so I don't sound like the professor right out the gate.
well, I've been pretty much putting hope into practice for different people out here in the world. Um, I would like to say that for me, um, hope hope wasn't always something that you can see that was tangible, with being able to have somebody in your corner, a support system. That's where hope really comes from, right? um, with Michael mentoring me and taking me in at a young age, and putting me in a different environment and exposing me to different tools that I did not have, that I was never exposed to, opened up my eyes to be able to go from being hopeless to having hope. So, and some of those different things that went on were him helping me understand at the academic side of my life, being able to learn how to read and write, literacy. I was struggling really bad in school. Him pushing the vision of reading, him getting me into sports and making me focus on those different things, and helping me with, most of all, my self-confidence. When you come from not so ideal situations, poverty and different things like that. In the book, some of our viewers, Brotherly Love, me and Michael both came from a two parents, that battle drug addiction. So when you come from those kind of situations, it's easy for you to be battling between your self confidence and feeling abandoned and different things of that nature. But um, him being able to take me in and be able to show me different walks of life really helped me as it relates to hope. So
Yeah, no, that's good. There's sometimes we cast these uh, directions on or instructions on what here's your situation. This is what you can do with your situation, and we kind of skip over what is the individual child. You were a young man at that point, child. How do they feel? What are the emotions? You mentioned confidence.
Right.
So it doesn't matter even if you had all the skills, and that's stuff we as adults deal with. If we have the skills and this and that, but we don't have confidence to use them, and kind of unpacking how the story behind it, how it came to fruition. So Gilbert's effort to improve in his area were not necessarily taken too seriously, right? And the book talks about teachers and his basically they'd given up if I'm understanding and remembering correctly. So the people in his life were not really there to walk him through. But you are a principal, right? And how do you suggest that students deal if they find themselves in those situations? And I'm an educator as well. We have teachers that know how to build relationships, and we also teachers are human, so we're fallible. And many times, if you see conditions in and over and over and over again, sometimes it hits you the wrong way. That's for all my teachers out there saying, "What is he talking about?" Yes, yes, teachers do not always support. So, as a principal, what are you doing now to kind of help um, teachers that you might have under you that are skeptical for students that are trying to change?
Great question. I'll back up a little bit and ease right back into this one, just to give a context between this and the concept of hope that seems a bit abstract at times, but I think there is a direct link. So we talk openly around our authentic experiences, which vary somewhat considering my birth order, my experience in school versus Gilbert's, especially from an academic standpoint. But when we use the concept of hope, we're talking about the silver lining between pain, fear, and success. The literal belief that something better must come. It's the idea of focusing on something bigger than one's circumstances. So there's just 5 areas we highlight in the book that I think apply to the second piece that I've learned over the course of my life and then applied as a principal. But number one, naming, holding space, and acknowledging systemic racism and its impacts on one's lived experience, especially as a person of color, dealing with certain things in poverty, but also in school. 2, mentors. 3, vulnerability. 4, mental health. And then mindfulness are sort of what our responses were in regard to the system. So systemic racism was sort of our issue that predisposed us to loneliness and all the different things that Gilbert described. And our response to that was sort of operationalizing things rooted in wellness that could actually allow us to find ourselves and thrive. Now, as a principal, the important thing to understand that I learned firsthand as a 21-year-old is my brother he came to me reading at a 4th grade level as a 10th grader in high school. So he was receiving special education services and he had an IEP or an individualized education plan. So what I had to really help teachers understand right away is that I wasn't asking for their opinion about whether or not they thought he could go to college or he could be successful or his dreams were real. I just needed them to be competent and be able to do their jobs. And they were competent, but we weren't asking them what they thought about his future. We just wanted them to prepare. And that was the charge of constantly holding them accountable for that. It was my job to figure out whether or not he can get on the path of what he saw was real and his in terms of work ethic and follow through. So that's really the biggest thing that I've learned as a principal is just helping teachers understand we have to do our best to prepare kids for the world that's necessary for their futures. It's their responsibility to figure out what that looks like for them.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction, and I appreciate that as an administrator myself, um, trying to not being interested in your opinion on what they do next. Do your job for the time that they're with you. I like that. I like that. Now, both of you, in your situation, you have experience of coming from poverty, coming from not having things readily available to you. And the question I have is for the parents that are out there that find themselves in this situation currently, they don't have access to private school. They got to put their kid on the bus. They got to make sure their kid gets the bus. they don't have access to the books. They can't connect during the hybrid classes. I was reading an article yesterday of this 11-year-old that used to like school, but because he doesn't have internet access, he's falling behind, and they're putting it on him like he's not trying, not understanding he doesn't have the same resources. So, what would you speak as encouragement or response to parents that are out there that might find themselves in these situations where they don't have resources? And if you can speak to, even if that child's not yours, right? So just in the community, what can you do as a parent, and then what can you do to help even others in your community that might be in that stance? Whoever wants to take it.
Jump in first since I'm in a groove. I think what sometimes we make this too abstract. I think it's more simple than I think the collective or the village really realizes. So what I found to be hugely successful in my school environments and places that I've been fortunate enough to serve is to go through a couple of things. Number one, make sure young people know that we see them and accept them 100% with respect to who they are. They need to also understand the value. So the most important three words that I say to my students all the time is "I love you." So they need to understand that they're loved even when they fail. They also have to understand that we're unconditionally committed to their futures, their ideas, and their intellectual capacity is valuable today and it's needed in the future. And then they also need to understand that nothing or no one can stop them from being able to achieve their dreams. I think those are the biggest things that, even though they sound like rhetoric, when kids hear that, it becomes their self-talk to themselves when we're not there. That's oftentimes where vulnerable and marginalized people lose in response to systemic racism and the things that are stacked up against us. But if the village and the people around them, even people beyond their parents and direct community, are able to constantly affirm them and speak life into their dreams and their possibilities, it becomes their own self-talk in those moments of adversity and situations where it's outside of the norm.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, I have something to add to that, Mike. That was actually great. You know, the biggest thing that I think back to my younger self, right? And being in that circumstance and growing up in poverty and growing up in adverse situations and different things of that nature. And the first thing to come to my mind is struggling with feeling like I was being seen for who I was, right? And I think so often what happens is that it doesn't make a difference how much money you got in your bank account. It doesn't make a difference what your zip code is. It doesn't make a difference what car you're driving, what you do for a living. For you to make a child or a kid feel seen and heard, you know, and coming from those adverse situations, um, I think that sometimes either some of us as parents, we may not have the tools and because maybe somebody never taught us these things and how important it is for us to pump this love back into our kids, you know. Um, and I would say the one thing that also that pretty much saved my life, you know, coming from poverty and coming from these adverse situations was Michael pretty much taking me in and helping me understand the value of my mental health, you know, and focusing on myself, focusing on the challenges I was faced with. And the first step to that was acceptance, right? Knowing that I had these things that I was faced with, you know. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know in the book, correct me if I'm wrong, fifth to eighth graders, that's target audience for the most part. I
Yep.
love the book. Um, I appreciate you, Dr. Allen, signing it for my daughter. She appreciates that. Appreciate the message that you put in there. Uh, and in the book, Gilbert, it talked about, uh, and I also appreciate it is a black story of a young black man, young black men, brothers, love, compassion. It's illustrated properly, right? All of that is near and dear. We need more of these types of books, and we need to highlight and share more of these types of books because they exist. We act like they're diamonds in the rough. Um, there's not enough of them, but I appreciate the ones that are out there. But Gilbert, in the book, it did talk about there was this the drug game was real, and there was a call for you to be involved in that, and you resisted. How were you able to do that?
You know, it, when I think back to that time period in my life, and everything that I was going through at that time, um, I actually had a hard time with resisting, to be honest with you, to be complete, transparent, and be vulnerable around that. Um, and the reason why I say that is when you come home every day to where the father figure or the man in the household is gone to college, right? And then you got your mom, just battling a drug addiction, and then you got all your other siblings there, and everybody's counting on you, to put food on the table and to provide, and not being able to do that. Um, it's kind of hard to watch everybody in the family suffer when he wasn't there. But I knew, to be honest, how I ultimately um, overcame, getting into, selling drugs and different things of that nature was me understanding that I had to make a choice. If everybody I grew up around, that I hung around were selling drugs or own drugs, right? So I kind of knew where that road was going to lead me because I was able to see that, I even seen it in the older generation too, with people I was around, Um, and once I actually got approached with, selling drugs is when I actually went hard to be able to get to a place where I was vulnerable enough to talk to my brother and tell him really what was going on in my life. Like, hey man, I'm struggling. I'm not doing good, man, and I'm getting ready to make this turn to the left. Either I'm about to sell these drugs because I gotta pay some bills around here, or hopefully you can help me out and put me in a different situation so I can get a different outcome out of this.
Okay. And to help out, Dr. Allen was bringing him with you to college, if I'm correct, right? Taking him there. But it wasn't really your college in Indiana, was it?
Northwest Indiana.
Northwest Indiana was probably a little different than where your brother was currently at.
Yeah, as my kids say, it from a race perspective or a racism perspective, it was really real, really real,
Really real, really real,
really real.
really real.
It was a different world. It was a different universe for us, and I didn't experience the community because I was a football player on the university, so it's a different context of how race showed up on the campus compared in the community. So yeah, it was a different world for sure.
So Gilbert, how did you make that transition? Because you basically left being the majority and coming into the minority. And for those people that don't know, people that are, I'll change my articulate talk and be very, people that are from the hood, right? They understand that that's your world. There is no traveling. There's no get on the plane. There's no summer vacation. That's your world. It's the corner stop or the bodega or whatever it is, and it's 6, 7 blocks. You know where you can go, where you can't go, what time to go, and that's your world. That's where you're comfortable. So, Gilbert, how did you go from being in that majority, regardless of positive or negative influences? It was what you knew, and you were in the majority, to Northwest Indiana being in the minority. How did you make that transition?
To be completely honest, it was hard. It was rough on me. The first month, I got there. I went to school, and I stayed after school, and I tried to try out for the track team, and I stayed over a lot longer than what I was supposed to stay over because I mean the tryouts and different things of that nature, and I forgot to actually call Mike and tell him that hey, I was going to be running late. So I ended up getting home late, and that was my first conversation with my brother, in which where he sat me down and talked to me about racism and race and how it plays a role in the world, right? And I couldn't completely understand where he was coming from at first, until he started to express his emotions and being like, look, you know, you can't do the same things we did in Waukegan because everybody there looked like us, right? And, here, you know, there's going to be different people here that may not care for you just because of the color of your skin. So you scare me to death, and I was like, man, that was the first time in my life where I was like, man, you know what? He right, man. I need to be accountable for this. So
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know if people, you kind of said it in passing when you talked about the father figure being away. You were talking about your brother. So I think people understand these fatherly talks were from two kids. Yes, one was in college and one was in high school. There are two kids. We like to look back on the generation and scratch our head on, oh, how did the every generation has a 30-year-old and a 20-year-old trying to figure it out. Now, when we get above that, we like to look back and say, oh, they're this and they're that. And then, yes, when you're 20, you don't have it figured out. So, with dealing with that, I guess this is whoever wants to take it. Um, you're talking about racism. You're talking about trying to finish college. How did you guys survive this experience? Gilbert, you're coming from your home with your other siblings and dealing with real lifelong consequences. One decision can have you dead or incarcerated. Going out into the cornfields of Northwest Indiana, Dr. Allen, you're trying to take care of your family, but also you manage your responsibilities and be a father and figure it out on your own. Just speak to, I'll let both of you, speak to this in your own way. How did you make it through the racism and the stress and the struggle with your hearts and your minds and your family intact?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was this real deep reliance on something bigger than what we can understand if we're honest. And I think that affinity, love, and that bond, um, we talk about this really openly, and I think I'll share it in this space. When I looked into Gilbert's eyes, even though I was the older brother, I saw a mirror and a reflection of myself. And I think it compelled me to be able to understand things that were bigger than my age and my circumstances. Allowed me to would have if I wasn't in that particular space, but it wasn't easy. But I think I knew if he could keep trying and he could keep pushing, I could keep trying and keep pushing, and we would be able to figure it out. We didn't have to have the answers for a week from now. We had to have answers for today, and we were just able to get through it together. It's one of the most gratifying things about that experience, as traumatic as it was, to have to look him in his eyes from time to time and see him in tears because of the types of things he endured, and know that I couldn't do anything to make his pain stop. As tough as that was, it's beautiful and rewarding when I think back and say, but I didn't go through what I was going through on my own, and he didn't go through what he was going through on his own. And so much of our bond was fortified and developed during that phase. And I think it's compelled us both to really take the training wheels off of how we go about empowering marginalized, vulnerable people. So that would be my take on it.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
and just to add to that, how do we get through it together? The sacrifice, man. Like for me, to see this, my brother sacrifice so much, right? Um, that he didn't have to do, right? Like he's my brother, not my father, and I really didn't take that lightly, like when I got there and to see him believe in me and sit down with me and help me with my homework and help me get up to speed as it relates to reading and writing, um, helping me understand more about myself by putting me in therapy so I can heal from the different wounds and stuff that went on in my childhood, like real deep in my childhood. Um, and a lot of the book don't detail this, but when I got there, my brother was in pharmacy school, and he left that to go into education. And the reason why he did that was to really have more time and to be able to help me with my reading and my writing. And at that moment in my life, even as a young man, I said, if he's willing to sacrifice like this for me, then I can't give up. I can't. So, um,
Wow. Wow. I know each of you, Dr. Al, if I'm not, you have your master's in social work, Gilbert, you're a licensed social worker, Dr. Allen, educator extraordinaire. Um, So I know you had a turning point, right? Because both of you had a back, and now you're where you're at today. Um, Gilbert, I'll go to you first. What was the turning point, if you have one, where you say, okay, this happened, and that put me. Now I'm moving. That brings you here today. What was that turning point? And then, Dr. Allen, what was yours?
You know what's so funny about it is that, and it brings a smile to my face. And the reasoning why is my turning point was really, I remember being like, what, 16 years old. And I was in Valparaiso. And my brother, he had went to work. He came home. He looked broken. Like, I mean, he looked broken. And he started telling me about this story of a principal that's actually detailed in the book, right? And how he was telling her that he was going to be a principal. He wanted to be one of the younger principals in the country so he can really help out marginalized group people. And for her to tell him that she felt like he couldn't accomplish that, and for me to have to look into his eyes and to see him so broken, and to see the emotions that he was carrying at that time, is really where I took a turning point in my life. And I said that, look, I don't care what I go through. I don't care how many times I fall down. I'm gonna get back up and I'm gonna figure this thing out. And I'm gonna rock it till the wheels fall off. So
Wow,
that's when I hit that turning point.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
You know what? It's funny, Cliff, because we have the exact same turning point. It's chapter 7 in the book, and that conversation it was like a spark, I feel like, going on inside of me up until that point. But that conversation threw like lighter fluid on top of my flame, and I feel like I just turned into a different person in that experience. Number one, understanding that if that's what I was going through as an honors student on the dean's list in college, and what does that mean for other people who didn't have all those types of opportunities and privileges that I had to get to that point in life? But I remember that particular experience, me deciding that not only was I going to be a principal, but I was going to really take it by the hold, and really run with it and give my whole self to it. So that was a turning point and defining period in my life. So young though, when I think back about it now, right? But yeah, that was a turning point for me as well. Yep.
That is awesome. We have reached the end of our time. But I want to, before we leave, I got a couple comments, and then I want to make sure you tell everybody how they can get the book and those types of things. But what I appreciate about this time in your story, and it's in the book, and you guys, it's like talking to a living book right here. So I appreciate this experience. Um, I didn't hear he needed to man up. I didn't hear he had to, I had to toughen him up. He had to be hard. What I did was I didn't hear any of that. I heard empathy. I heard love. These are things that I think as men are overlooked in how men need love too. Men need someone to see them. And I just really appreciate how you guys have share that. It comes through in the book, but then here to hear that's who you are. Now I know why it's in the book is refreshing to me. So I just want to say I appreciate that, because the interactions of turning points and coming together was about support, was about love. You said when I looked into his eyes, it wasn't, oh, he got beat up and I had to take him to the gym. I needed to toughen him up, and you just needed all these things that from a societal standpoint we say, well, if you're gonna make it, if you're gonna come from this spot, if you're gonna do it, you gotta know. And so I really appreciate that. And I want to take this time to just say thank you to both of you for giving a preview into that. And as we close out, any last comments you have, please put them in there and make sure you tell us where and how we can get access to the book. And just so you know, I've shared this with you from a CARES Learning Partnership perspective. We now uh, are using your book as a teaching tool for when we go in. We do a lot of anti-bullying. We also do social and emotional leadership training, and we utilize this book, your book, to help people understand that there's always a story. There's always a story. It's not just the person. It's not just the student sitting in front of you. It's not just that teacher that you're trying to help. teachers have stories too. We ask them to come in and do their job and everything. They go through divorce. They are marginalized. They are undervalued. And so, yes, it's written for fifth to eighth graders, but there's so many lessons in there. And so we utilize that, and I encourage anyone that's listening to this and watching this to seek you guys out to get this book, because you will not be disappointed on the variety of different ways that you can utilize it. But tell us where we can get the book and any parting words you might have.
Thank you. I'll start off with the technical piece, the book piece. So you can get our book online at brotherlylovebook.com. That's brotherlylovebook.com. That's directly from our website. If you would like to reach out to get bulk book supplies or to book us for an author visit or keynote, you can reach us at 872-256-1170, 872-256-1170. I think my wrap up points would be, it's exciting to be able to partner with someone on the West Coast who's doing some progressive work, like you're doing, Cliff, with CARES, and the comprehensive approach that you all are taking with SEL focus, but seeing the humanity and training folks who in the school setting recognize how valuable that is for kids and identity development. But for me as a Black man, it's really, really important to just show up and be my whole self. And I just think it's important for us to start uniting in unique ways to try to empower vulnerable and marginalized people. And the biggest thing I can say is nothing or no one can stop us from being able to become what we were born to become. But it does take us to be humble enough to be able to receive the information that's going to help us get there. I'm just hoping that so much of what my gift and my purpose is to the world is help people connect the dots. And that's a lot of what Gilbert has to do as well. So thanks for the space, Cliff.
No problem.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having us here, talking to us about our book. We really appreciate it. And the last closing words I will have is that love is the one thing that helps us overcome anything there is in this world, you know. And so often as men, right? If we come from adverse situations, you know, we don't get that. We don't get that love. We don't get that kiss. We don't get that hug, right? And but I just want to make sure everybody know that if you're going through anything, know that there's somebody out here that show you appreciation, that loves you. So
No words better spoken, my friend. No words better spoken. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the time. Look forward to collaborating with you guys on other projects. You guys take care.
You too. Thank you.